Dr. Shahira Abdullah.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this year's budget has brought to focus the worries Singaporeans have regarding the rising cost of living and their ability to cope with it. Official statistics taken from MAS and MTI indicate that Singapore's core inflation in January rose to 2.4% on a year-on-year basis, the highest level in more than 9 years. This increase in inflation rate is contributed in no small part by the rising cost of food, electricity, and gas in our country, brought about by supply chain disruptions caused by the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine causing the prices of oil and natural gas to skyrocket, as well as the imminent threat of further global supply chain disruptions occurring down the road, Singaporeans are no doubt worried that the cost of living will continue to increase to a level greater than they can grapple with. This worry has also trickled down to the youths. Will I be able to earn enough in future to keep up with these increases? Am I reskilling or upskilling enough so I can earn better wages? Can I support my family? These are just some questions that youths ask. And lastly, how do we ensure those more vulnerable are not left behind? This budget's theme, charting our new way forward together, demonstrates that everyone has a part to play for us to progress as a country. This budget is noteworthy because it tries to uphold the values of care and inclusivity. This budget introduces measures to ensure that those with more contribute more to help build a more balanced society. For example, I'm highly encouraged by the recent moves to increase the personal income tax, property tax, and luxury car tax levied on the more well-off in Singapore. It sends a strong signal that Singapore wants to redistribute its wealth and reduce wealth inequality. More importantly, it sends a signal that Singapore prioritizes efforts to ensure that our social mobility framework remains agile. It is a good start, and one that I'm sure was only made after careful research and calibration. While the wealthy should not be made to shoulder the entire of a society's tax burden, at the same time it is only equitable for those with more to also contribute greater to the society they have benefited from. I do hope these measures are but the beginnings of a more progressive tax system in Singapore. As the Minister stated in his budget speech, everyone chips in and contributes to a vibrant economy and strengthens social compact, but those with greater means contribute a larger share. The COVID-19 pandemic has already affected low-income families in rental housing disproportionately compared to the rest of the population. The Singapore Longitudinal Early Development Study, published in November 2021, found that lower-income families were hit the hardest by the pandemic due to the economic impact, job losses, struggles with adapting to work from home and home-based learning, as well as by social distancing measures affecting them physically and mentally. The combination of rising costs driven by this period of heightened inflation and the newly announced GST increase will hit low-income families hard. I am therefore heartened to see that this budget has boosted social support for Singaporeans, especially those from the low income. The budget promises a top-up of the ComCare Fund by $5 million over 5 years, with another $12 million awarded over 4 years to self-help groups to better support low-income families. I am also heartened that the GSTV will remain to help defray some of the cost of living, and that the accessible income threshold for GSTV will be increased to enable more Singaporeans to qualify for the rebates. However, I would like to inquire if the government would be prepared to reconsider how it awards the GSTV. Currently, GSTV is only awarded after a review of both the accessible income and the annual value of a recipient's property. It is also only awarded to Singapore citizens aged 21 years and above. This ignores the fact that residents of houses with identical annual values may have vastly different financial needs and require greater rebates based on the number of household members and children under 21 who may be residents. In the same vein, will the government also be looking at the eligibility criteria of each social welfare scheme, especially in the backdrop of rising costs? If it is assessed that it is not the time for such a review, then would there be clear guidance of when the government will decide to review the eligibility criteria and the amount of benefits under each social welfare scheme? Madam Deputy Speaker, in Malay there is a proverb, Hati gajah sama dilapar, hati kuman sama dicecah. When there is more, everyone will get more. When there is less, everyone will get less. Scaffolding vulnerable groups is something that youths feel strongly about. The National Youth Council's regular sentiment polling showed that in the area of supporting vulnerable populations, the top issues youths feel need to be addressed include the empowerment and social safety nets for lower income communities, the rights, treatments and policies for migrant workers, and capability development and empowerment of persons with disabilities. In this regard, I wish to highlight that the migrant worker population is set to be more vulnerable than ever to the effects of the rising costs and GST increases. The GST increase will affect them from the onset, and at the same time, they will not be able to qualify for the GST vouchers. They are also less able to adapt to these increases due to their low wages and debt. They do need help. The migrant workers have been integral in our nation building. Our streets, houses, and skyscrapers are built by them. Does the government have any plans on reviewing the social support schemes to ensure that their well-being is also looked after? For persons with disabilities, I am pleased that we are launching the Enabling Master Plan 2030, and I'm looking forward to hearing more details about it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will now speak of the environment. In this budget, Singapore has taken a bold move forward and is something I support. In terms of carbon taxes, aiming to increase it to $80 per tonne in 2030. This may inevitably lead to the rise of electricity bills, and coupled with the effect of inflation, many families and businesses are concerned about how they can cope. It is comforting that additional usage rebates will be provided to cushion this transition. However, as seen by how electricity prices may be affected by many factors, recently by geopolitical changes, could I ask if the government is considering more support for households and businesses if the electricity bills increases more than expected? Likewise, green technologies are more expensive in the short term. As Minister Fu answered in my PQ in the last sitting, and I quote, "Green products and services may cost a bit more, but in a competitive market, businesses will compete to provide consumers with the most value for money products and services. As sustainable products and services become more mainstream, economies of scale could bring down costs. This means, however, that in the meantime, costs will trickle down to consumers. Will there be monitoring on how the costs are trickling down to consumers, similar to the safeguards and monitoring that will take place by the Committee Against Profiteering for the GST hikes?" Madam Deputy Speaker, another issue of importance I would also like to bring up is mental health. The rising cost of living may lead to greater mental anxiety and strain among Singaporeans about the future. This is exacerbated by the impact of the pandemic on mental health. A new study by BMG suggests that catching the COVID-19 virus increases the risk of developing mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, stress and adjustment, and substance use disorders. As we know, a significant proportion of our population is infected with the virus. It is significant that the Minister mentioned mental health and the Interagency Task Force for Mental Health in the budget. It signals the seriousness of the government to tackle the issue and its recognition that all segments of society have mental health needs. However, Singapore Mental Health Matters, which is a community of mental health policy advocates comprising individuals who also have lived experiences of mental health challenges, recently advocated for a whole-of-government approach to mental well-being. I agree with this approach as it would consolidate all efforts between ministries, public agencies, social service agencies and ground-up initiatives to plan for the short, medium and long term more effectively. Can we therefore go one step further from a transient interagency task force to the formation of a permanent mental well-being office under PMO, such as one inspired by SNDGO? Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems that there are many concerns facing Singaporeans. The youths may be especially worried about the future. Even before the pandemic, Singapore youths were already concerned about job prospects, the climate crisis, inequality, and mental health. The World Economic Forum Global Risk Report 2021 also showed a worsening of mental health since the start of the pandemic, leaving youths vulnerable to depression, anxiety, and disillusionment. In China, we have the lying flat movement. Though I do not think Singaporean youths are at this stage yet, how do we prevent this from happening and wearing out the potential of our youths, especially when bad news seems to come from all sides? I hope that the youth can find comfort that this budget demonstrates how the government places importance on improving social mobility and reducing inequality in the rapidly changing global economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, even with all the disruptions facing Singapore and the world, in my engagements with youths, I discovered something else. Hope. Hope and optimism that together is one Singapore. When we make the effort to look out for one another, regardless of our differences, we can make sure that no one gets left behind. There is a common Malay saying, berat sama dipikul, ringan sama dijinjing. It means when we face challenges, we surmount them together, because together we are stronger. Together, even the greatest of challenges make light work. This is exemplified by a pantun written by then 12-year-old Iman Solihin bin Muhammad Farid, which won an SG50 poetry competition. Mengayuh rakit mencari duku, singgah sebentar di tepi muara. Apabila ditanya tempat asalku, aku bangga menjawab Singapura. Baju basah perlu dijemur, jika dipakai dingin terasa. Singapura aman juga makmur, hidup tenteram berbilang mangsa. Buah manggis di atas para, kulit dikupas, isinya dimakan. Cintai nusa, sayangi negara, jiwa raga rela kukorbankan. Therefore, in these times of uncertainty, I would like to say to the youths, have courage, as it takes courage of heart, will, mind and spirit to face the headwinds of tomorrow. Madam Deputy Speaker, I support the budget.